This is K8BYP's 8th video in transmission lines and antennas. In video 7, we looked at field principles with both antennas and moving electromagnetic fields. And it may be belaboring a point I kind of made in a previous video, but it's very, very important to explain to you how Maxwell totally up electrical science and physics with the words so bad I can't say. That's why I used to illustrate how field theories have become corrupted and falsely applied to antennas, and therefore it makes it impossible to understand antennas, A, and to optimize them, B. I have personally thrown out all this old theory and gotten hold of the correct theories, and they are in some ugly physics with pages of differential equations. But the principles are simple, and I'm going to show them to you. It first takes throwing out the old, and here again is a summation of the old. Maxwell was asked to take a segment of wire, a straight line with a dot on each end, assume a current flow sinusoidal through, establish E and M fields, sum the fields up in 3 dimensions. That is all bowl. The only thing about that is not bowl is a segment of wire. Currents do not flow along wires. Sinusoidal currents do not radiate. That segment of wire with nothing else around it does not exude an electrical field, because in field physics, that field vector, the dashed line with the arrowhead, E, an eigenvector is a modern term, that can't go nowhere. There has to be a charge on each end, a charge on the wire, and a charge somewhere else for the vector to terminate upon. If there's no electrical field line moving, then there's no magnetic line curling. So none of that's valid. Throw it all out. The problem is, once we throw that out and we throw circuit theory out, we're left with nothing. And that's not a good place to be. From video 7, you saw this diagram, but I left out something important. The 2 charges on the antenna wire, Q sub 1, Q sub 2, coupled to this plane below to Q sub 1 prime and Q sub 2 prime, there must be 2 charges. Contrary to the poor fools that believe in the bull about NVIS, there's nothing going up from that arm. There's nothing above it. The field can try to go to infinity, but to reach infinity would require an infinite amount of energy, and that just totally shreds the principle of conservation of energy, so entirely false. Here in this diagram, we have the foundation of understanding what the antenna function is, and it has nothing to do with this nonsense, not as simply stated like this. Yes, there's an advanced version of this that it has to do with, but there are things that happen that are much more complex than this, and they're based in nuclear theory. But here's the principle to show us what antennas are not and what they are. And in this video, I'm going to show you by starting off what are not antennas. Since we've totally thrown out circuit theory, there's no way to approach that dipole, the top of that transmission line, coupling fields into that wire using circuit theory. Doesn't exist, doesn't apply. But it's common to try to approach these things we don't understand, trying to base that on our past experience. That gets us in serious trouble when it comes to antennas. But I'm going to look at a couple of hysterical myths of what people think are antennas that are not. That'll help give us some insight into what an antenna really is. Here's a short list and short explanation of what hams are wasting a lot of time on, under the delusion that these are antennas. And by golly, either these aren't on the air or they work very poorly, because I am getting on the air with my real dipole and beating the living out of these antennas and their signals. with a fraction of the power these people are using with these absolute bull fake antennas. Loop. Two of these words are correct. Magnetic loop antenna. Yep, magnetic. Yep, loop, not an antenna. A loop is a single turn of an inductor. An inductor is not an antenna. It generates magnetic fields, and as I showed earlier from the text, electric waves by scaling, yes, it will very feebly emit some magnetic field at a distance, but that is not an antenna. The end-fed, an old form from the 1930s, and the modern hoax of an end-fed half-wave, which the half-wave part is utter bull, because if you read Radio Antenna Handbook from 1935 from Radio Magazine's Engineers, you will see that the end-fed is a random length wire. Somebody has invented this bull about end-fed half-wave so they can sound important by throwing an acronym around. That's not an antenna, that's an electrostatic coupling. Those two can couple to an antenna if they can find one. And one of the more interesting contexts I ever made was with someone that had a loop and was coupling into a rain gutter. Now you got an antenna system, but not just a loop. Off-center fed, not an antenna. Piece of crap. Forced by constraints, physical constraints, I get it. Lots of people use them. They don't work worth a... And I have blown the doors off of almost everyone that uses these. I mentioned in a previous video that I worked with a couple of hams here locally to an operator in Missouri, or Misery, as we pronounce it. They used 100 watts plus. The one using off-center fed was using a Heathkit amplifier. I was using 1 watt, folks. Absolutely obliterated this piece of shit off-center fed. The operator sat there speechless, wondering why the other end couldn't hear him on his, I call them OCDs. That's a joke. His OCD antenna. But the other operator heard me with a proper dipole with a watt. This is one of the latest hoaxes. The short fat metal cylinder is an antenna. It is not. It's another version of the end-fed myth, which is an electrostatic coupling. These are not antennas. These are an attempt at a circuit element. What is an antenna was not really understood until about the past, perhaps 10 years, more or less. And the first paper I was able to find that correctly set forth what antenna emission is and is caused by was published by IEEE last October 2021. So what you're getting here in my videos is the latest.